Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm just going to give people a few more minutes to come on in. Feel free to chat amongst yourself if you want or wait. But I'll just give it a few more minutes before we start the talk. Okay, I'm going to start my spiel and more people can come in while I'm talking because I'm not the important part. Thank you everyone for coming tonight. We're so excited to be here with Jenny Day, who is our current artist in residence. Just some little ground rules here before we get going is please keep yourself on mute during the talk. Jenny will give her presentation, and then at the end, we'll open it up for Q&A. So hold your questions until the end. If you're worried you're going to forget your question, or if you'd rather not be the one to ask it out loud, feel free to put it in the chat and I'll ask it out loud later. And I think those are my ground rules for everyone today, other than saying thank you for being here. I'm Caitlin McClure. I'm the Gallery and Residency Manager. And Jenny Day is a painter who blends actual landscapes with imagery from her memory and from social media to create fantastical scenes that focus on small and large-scale personal or environmental disasters. Without any further ado, I'm going to pass the proverbial mic over to Jenny and let you take it away.
Okay. Okay, so hi everybody. Okay, so hopefully you can all see this. It's looking all right. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. So hi, my name is Jenny Day, and I'm a current artist in residence at Greenwich House, and thanks for coming to my artist talk. So I've lived in a number of different places. I've moved around a lot, and this has affected how I portray my sense of place in my work. I grew up in California, and I went to college at UC Santa Cruz. I earned a bachelor's degree in environmental studies, studied ecology and sustainable agriculture, and I lived in co-ops, a tent in the woods, and a trailer park on campus. And so this is a friend of mine that lived next door. And at this place, we had roller skate races and grew gardens. And I feel like a lot of this kind of aesthetic has ended up turning up in my work and informing me like over time. I earned my BFA in painting at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and I lived in a one-room cabin and married Mike, who is a dog musher at the time. And I made everything I could at this time. I worked with blacksmiths. I learned how to weld. I made things out of moose hide, and I tried out printmaking, and I finally came to painting. I focused on identity, grief, and loss. The paintings were heavy-handed, thick and textural, often on panel, more about getting an emotion across than anything else. My BFA work was layered, washy, and influenced by dreams, interactions with creatures, and my past. I mostly stained and sanded back the surface, and I did not use references. They were rough self-portraits back when I wore a knife on my belt. And that's, you can see that here, there's, that was the belt I wore. And the photos from this time period are, you know, it was a while ago, back before I knew how to take photos. I was learning how to paint while hoping to portray complex relationships and trauma, investigating composition texture, and form, thinking about dual realities, multiple selves, and loss. As a traveler later on, I was amazed to experience things I dreamt about but never seen. For example, houses built on stilts and water. Something I had imagined as precarious in a painting was a reality in other parts of the world. After my time in Alaska, I moved to Tucson and went to graduate school. And this was a trailer that we had. There I had a year where I painted white over everything. The program was designed to break down and rebuild my painting style. I painted about Alaska and memories of snow, abandoned, lost places. The paint was thick and textural, the imagery barely hinting at a real place, more a jumble of multiple narratives at once. And this painting actually has a lot of iridescence. All of this is actually iridescent, but it's pretty hard to photograph. The figure began to be replaced by a general vastness and interest in architecture. The idea of a strong narrative fell away, and I wanted to capture distance, movement, and time. I worked on a painting in multiple directions, sometimes obliterating the place with abstraction, collaging paper onto the canvas and pulling it out, later to reveal a history of layers. An important note is that at this time we renovated and built houses that we lived in at the same time. I crawled through windows and lived on porches and packed up everything we owned multiple times a year. So my home sometimes looked like this. And I shared this photo with some friends in grad school, and they thought our house had some massive event, like an environmental disaster. But we were just renovating. And then it was completed and looked like this, and we would sell it. And here's another one. So my world that I surrounded myself in was also changing. Constant chaos and then clean, harsh lines. Over time, this attention to the space around me changed my work. Architecture, home, and sharp modernist lines became important. This is a tiny house that we built on some land in Santa Fe, and it has a living roof. I find that wherever I go, what I see and experience is eventually translated into the work. The leading lines in this photo are something that have always captivated me. And same with this one, with the pattern in the tile. So I realized I was creating my own place, thinking about what the ocean looks like there, the desert, the mountains. With each change of place, event in the news, or intense conversation, I felt like there was an influence in my work. I was just starting to think about how to use color to convey environmental collapse, toxic pinks and putrid greens, getting lost in creating blobby details on the horizon line. I was influenced by concepts of arrival and departure to an elsewhere or a someplace. I reimagined places, mixed up information, competing for our attention. Street signs, ads, traffic, all boiled down to its simplest forms, pattern, line, and color. The work explores visions of utopia and dystopia to examine the divergence between the manufactured and natural landscape, employing a lens of cultural geography to determine how place is created, trying to capture the layered interactions between the self and the environment. I did a year-long residency in West Palm Beach, Florida, right when Hurricane Irma hit the Keys. Shaken by the possibility of a Category 5 hurricane, I became obsessed with looking at disaster photos. Circling back into my interest in the environment, reading about what happened to ecosystems, animals, and people that were disturbed by natural disasters. This obsession with disasters slowly entered my work. Fragmentation had more purpose. In earlier work, I was creating new places, piecing together memories, and Make It Greener was a turning point. I became interested in the painting as object, thinking of it as more than a window. I wanted to immerse myself in the landscape. I started running a lot, especially on the epoxy trail, completely surrounded by swamps. I saw wild pigs here, and my goal was to often run through the swamp until the forest gave way to this open meadow where a flock of ibis would sit on abandoned machinery. The sky was often pink. I shifted not only formally, but conceptually, focusing on places affected by climate change, consciously merging my background in environmental studies and art to talk about how environmental degradation affected our sense of place. I made collages from Google Maps and disaster photos to serve as a starting point for a painting. Layers of mediation removed the viewer from the original image, mimicking alienation from the experienced earth. The end result depicts a landscape assembled from disparate viewpoints. The work creates a sense of longing as it examines human demand and the effects of environmental degradation on an understanding of place. In the work, I seek to reconcile a romantic notion of landscape with the way that space is unavoidably fragmented and eroded through use and conceptualization. This work discusses how the damaged landscape, once altered, reconstructs itself. Influenced by resource extraction, architecture, and a need to document human effect on nature, this series investigates the construction of a relationship to land, the built environment, dystopia, and utopia. So I was making work like this, like fairly serious. And on the side, I was making random little objects like this that nobody saw. So I started with making things out of fabric. And I kind of forgot that I had a background after grad school. I really only did painting in grad school. And I forgot that I had had this time period in Alaska and Maine and other places where I made objects out of anything, and just started experimenting. We also moved to Santa Fe, and we bought a beat-up house with beautiful views and lots of space for a studio. So my studio right now is actually, this is a painting studio and this is a clay studio. This is what our living room used to look like. It's different now. We have a lot of light. This is in my painting studio. And this is the clay studio downstairs, really early in the morning. So I started to really think about collage. I've been making them since grad school and using them as references. And I often make 20 collages before I find one that works. I would edit the collage, the drips, or any of the mistakes before it became a painting. And this, I don't think this is going to play, but this was a video I took. I started seeing lines in the landscape and thinking of fragmentation. So this was while I was driving. I think actually my husband was driving. So I hunted for fragmentation in the landscape. And I just loved that line. So then I made a series called Our Shared Disaster. And this was after I had let go of my flip phone and I got an iPhone. In the world of backlit screens, the digital took hold of my landscapes and altered the real. And I did a lot of glitter. So this texture is actually poured glitter. I focused on forest fires in California near my hometown and video game portrayals of landscapes. The fragmentation and the collage becoming equal to the place that I was investigating. And text emerged. Eventually, I was able to exhibit this series at the Phoenix Art Museum. And in 2018, my work was also informed by a trip to Port Aransas, Texas, after it was hit by Hurricane Harvey. And it wasn't really, it was kind of just by chance that I kept running into environmental disasters. I wasn't seeking them out. And here's my take on Nice Try Harvey. And it became a merging of personal and natural disaster. I saw resilience there that I had never experienced before. Buildings torn down, remnants of ocean scenes corralled by caution tape and trash. Everywhere, photos of what the buildings had looked like and the reality of what they ended up as less than a year later. This piece is meant to be ironic, serious, and silly all at once. Celebratory and incredulous in such an intense time period. Concrete dolphins, the debris of an old dock, the American flag amidst all of it. Disasters and variations of childhood memory intertwined. Old trucks and swimming pools, nostalgic on the ride. The work became playful, even though I ached for the world. Nothing was better. I became flip, a resigned humor like a layer of scar tissue between my concerns and the abrasion all around, using glitter and saturated hues to lighten the seriousness. And so before I was making those little fabric things, now I started making ceramics. So I wasn't showing them to anybody. And I had this idea that maybe I would create installations that would merge the objects in the room with my inventive landscapes in the back of my mind. This is another one which felt really exciting at the time. The work started to just shift again with the series Letting Go of Utopia, rethinking about how to approach mourning, feeling a little more hopeful while watching the work of climate change activists like Greta Thunberg. In the work I had tried to jest at loss, covered it up with trashy glamour and glitter, but the grief still remained. I kept trying to title paintings Failed Utopia, and my husband would say something like, "You used that already," or something like it. "You'd want to name every painting that." And he was right. California is omnipresent, a grounding overlaid with other landscapes, Utah, Cambodian beaches, Dubai. Misplaced animals stand as totemic witnesses to a world eroded by an accumulation of insults, both large and small. And at this point, I felt like I was letting go of the hope of seeing it any other way. Damaged landscapes pulled apart, puzzled over, persevering with a litany of scars. The sculpture shifted from blobs to flat bases, literally a painting in three-dimensional form, and animals and narrative started to take over, which all of that felt like a big departure from where I'd been earlier. I made a large series of them, working out some of my trials and error with glazes on a smaller scale. Like hurricanes and other large natural events, I researched toxic algae blooms from industrial farm runoff, imbalances in nature. And the research informed the work not just in concept, but in color. The landscape that I was in, now the high desert of Santa Fe, began to show up in my paintings. And it really wasn't intentional. I would look at a painting later and realize that there was some kind of connection. Slowly, the intense fragmentation fell away. I felt like I was suddenly okay using narrative, humor, or anything else that the work might need. 2020 came, and as we know, with it came COVID. My outward concerns started to reflect my inner ones. The world felt turned upside down and unsafe. My collages became more complex, huge epic sagas, violent, mythic, and turbulent. Large forest fires in my home state and all over the West with rolling blackouts became common. My own memories of concern over fire from living in Southern California and Alaska were at the forefront of my mind. And figures started to appear. Animals joined the work, and the landscape was no longer the only element in the imagery that felt strained and burdened. I thought about how the places I had imagined in my earlier work, the fragmented landscape, had evolved and mutated, created dual realities, mirrors, and mirages. I wanted there to be an adaptation, that the places were not just overripe and toxic, but that the creatures there could find a new way to exist in landscapes that were read like a planet, become better, and evolve. The sculptures and my process with them changed. I began to sketch out ideas and emulate them. What were once blobs with no direction suddenly had purpose. I wanted not just a two-dimensional look into the reality I was creating, but a sculptural version as well. My process of glazing felt like painting, layering over and over, firing one piece 5 times, constantly reacting to what I had done before. After a tumultuous few years, I found myself dreaming of the apocalyptic, the 4 horsemen, frogs falling from the sky, and the sea parting in triumphant arcs. In this work, memory is permeated with nostalgia to the point of corruption. A landscape singed and burning, animals fleeing, soaring, and independent, their entities barely tethered to the underlying structure. Snakes get drunk on nectar, burst from vases, bug-eyed and hungover, the sentiment overripe and romanticized, useless. Flowers grow into fur, fires emerge in snow. A grotesque glimpse into a world gone wrong grows into leaping, looming celebration. Everywhere I looked, I felt this underlying chaos, and my work reflected that. The landscape in this piece was from a drive that I took across the Eastern Sierras. With clay, I was able to focus on texture and form, forget about what I was trying to say and get lost, refine myself and bring that back into painting. I felt free to make anything, even oozing, drippy flowers morphing into swan heads. Or a penguin offering a squid up to the sky, its habitat so abundant and overpopulated that there is barely room to stand. The sculptures helped me to mimic an overtaxed society, pushed to its limits and recreating itself. I let go of my expectations and just worked. I realized this other world was not a mirror, but a portal. Resilience evolved and mutated. In this made-up place, the most horrendous things could be overcome. Grief is met with bejeweled stallions, beat-up trucks tear through the sky into far-off sunsets. And rams pound information back together, bit by bit, new, ancient, heroic. The unfathomable transforms to something reborn, something hopeful. In 2021, my exhibition Needs More Wonder featured some of the largest sculptures I've made. Because of the size of kilns I'm working with, I made this body of work in pieces that can fit back together. And I also don't have, like a crane or anything in my studio. So this landscape is populated by an army of friendly creatures. Here, the burdens of coronavirus, climate change, and political division are dismissed by hot pink kittens that arc gracefully through meteor showers and owls that bury into beds of daffodils. In this place where he is edged out by the fantastic and mystical snails trail neon candy canes through the scorched earth. The apocalyptic is supplanted by the surreal and the allegorical. And this piece is really large, and it has a number of different sides. And so there's like a little badger here, and these are actually metallic. And then there's ribbons of pink going all the way around. I felt like anxiety followed me, and that it was a shadow world, the real, a funhouse mirror. The work suggests that magic is possible while anchoring itself in the grotesque. A blissful, almost psychedelic reverence for nature exists, but the fantasy's origins leach through in the details and distortions. The animals are often translucent, reflective. Here was a place where nature persists, proliferates, and transforms. I began working with a gallery in Germany, Gallery Bengelstrader, and made a show called Half-Light. And it was about the experience of running at night, shape-shifting in the middle of winter, moonlit patches of snow, the feeling of crisp air, and large owls settling in the scrubby pines. In that exhibition, I wanted to recreate the feeling of gloaming, how shapes shift, a large rock flickering into an outstretched mountain lion, a stand of juniper, maybe a man or something in between. That when I would get closer, that shadows would quickly return to their original form, my mind playing tricks, grasping for narrative. That in the half-light, the landscape presented incomplete information, ripe for the generation of fantastic narratives, imagined threats, non-existent allies, a world built on a scaffold of dimly illuminated fragments. This body of work resides in this landscape, in the unconstrained mind, when the sun goes down and another world begins. Interstitial spaces as light and day are in reality shift, and ephemeral moments float in night. Memories are re-examined and childhood nostalgia shows up, spectral, wrecked, and mysterious. Here I was forced to return to instinct, and I speculate about infinity. The sky, the darkness, so big, a cavernous mouth ready to swallow. My sculpture shifted too. I became even more maximalist, adding rhinestones and cut glass and frit, and you can kind of see that here. I think this was the first one I started doing. The objects connected with the animals and were not just abandoned vases, but cowboy boots, typewriters, things like that. Old gas cans would sprout mushrooms, and kittens turned green and were wrapped up in bows. The sculptures became even more childlike and whimsical. I found myself researching images of things like roller skates or snail parts, or the flowers of a nightshade. And I also made a dollhouse. I didn't put any pictures up of that, but I've been thinking I kind of want to make a series of them. Another recent shift has been to add figures back into my work, which has been funny. I had a gallerist. One of my first galleries I worked with was like, oh, they're going to come back. And I was like, oh, no, they're not going to come back. But he was totally right. So with the freedom I found in sculpture, I decided to reclaim the figure. It had always been the ghost in my work, an ever-present shadow. I thought I had tamped it down, repressed it in graduate school, only to paint work with monolithic objects in decomposing architecture. Intent on chasing down human impact while doing my best to ignore any thread of narrative. Over time, the specter loomed large, filled the lungs of animals witness to chaos. And this is a backpack with little gold butterflies and bees. Now I feel like nothing is repressed, and the work shifted to include adaptive, celebratory creatures and fanciful sculptures. This is the first piece I've made where there's like these metal posts attached that I'm pretty excited about. Human presence hinted at, long prominent in its absence, is now explicit. The human form is welcome back into the raucous bestiary of my imagined worlds. So also I wanted to share some of the sculptural influences. I didn't really share any painting ones in Spanish House, but Francesca D'Amato is one, and I actually just saw a show of hers at Timothy. She's in a group show at Timothy Taylor Gallery, and I just love her color and pattern, just all of it, the form, and you know how she builds things in parts. I also really like Raoul Denis' work, and he, you'll see in a little bit, but he works primarily with beads. And I just love the pattern and texture. Also Rose Nestler's forms and the comments on the body and the roles we play. Rose Eakin is, I saw a body of work that she made in Tucson when I lived there, and it was so inspiring to me. She makes these massive installations. Like she's done one that's, you know, like an abandoned rock concert, and all the little cigarette butts and solo cups on the floor, and it's just so good at detail. And so that brings me to the work I'm making here at Greenwich House. And so I have a bunch of mock-ups of an exhibition I'm working on. So this is called A Feast to Remember, and it's going to be shown in Alabama, and hopefully it's going to travel to other museums later on. So A Feast to Remember is going to investigate climate change with humor and caution. It'll depict natural and personal disaster. Central to A Feast to Remember is a ruined dinner party on a dining table. Paintings will act as windows into a ravaged landscape. Hot pink algae blooms in the aftermath of hurricanes. Visitors will explore a chaotic version of the Last Supper, all ceramic and mixed media sculpture, whimsical and raucous. A hand-tufted rug, embroidered napkins, chairs tipped over. Chandeliers and acrylic chains suspended from the ceiling at multiple heights. The lights adorned with swans and snakes, dripping with flowers, loops of chain and rhinestones. A shimmering coyote caught in the act of ripping a chair apart. On the table, a feast, plates mounded with food, smashed, an alligator tearing into ripe pomegranates, a bear pulling a tablecloth off the table. The exhibition, celebratory in its joyful chaos, a final party abandoned, subsumed by biophilia, a cautionary disaster in the making. So a part of this is going to have beaded sculptures as well. So I've been beading these foam pieces that are partially made from taxidermy objects and then also spray foam. And the installation will examine our need for myth while encapsulating our relationship to land and the exploitation of the environment. The work is not just coping with the world, but refashioning it. And this is the bear that still needs to be beaded. So toxic hues, broken objects, and the remnants of a dinner party disturbed by chaos will be a reflection of an external world gone awry, anarchy amidst a kingdom in peril. And so I'm also making a series of rugs. This is one of them that are going to go under the table. And hopefully there'll also be some going up onto the wall. So I started looking at mushrooms to inspire them. And there'll also be a lot of candelabras. So I have a few I've made with lizards and snakes chasing mice, things like that. And then there's also going to be a number of separate candles, and the candles are going to be twisted. So they're kind of like this. And at Greenwich House, I ended up making a lot of plates that are like lily pads, and this big alligator that's going to be in the center of the table. And then if you guys are interested, here's my website, and then I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. So thank you.
Thank you. I can open the floor for any questions that anyone has.
Oh gosh. Thank you so much. I'm sorry. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed the way that you've approached climate change in your art, and I joined late and I might have missed a bit, but I was wondering, the Greenwich Village, was that a residency that you attended, that you were there for?
Oh, that's where I am now. So in Greenwich House Pottery is in New York. And so I'm doing an artist residency here. I've been here for about 6 weeks. And so the last little bit of my presentation is just that I've been working on like some of the pieces for this last show that's coming up in Alabama. Yeah, so that's the other parts of I've done other residencies, but right now I'm physically in Greenwich House. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, it did. Yeah, I really enjoyed what I saw of your work. I love that you did your own dinner table, or are working on your own dinner table. Yeah, I really actually, your work resonates with me quite a bit. I do ceramics and painting as well.
Oh, great.
So yeah, thank you. It was really great and inspiring to see what you've been working on.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And then we have something in the chat, which is from Jennifer Danner. Jenny, she asks, have you seen Kathleen Ryan's work? She shows at Karma in New York.
No, I'll have to write that down. No, I haven't yet. I would love to see her work.
It's maybe the one show you haven't seen in New York City.
I-
You've done such a good job of seeing everything.
Yeah. I felt like while I was here, if I wasn't in the studio, I better go see everything I possibly can see.
He does a lot of really large beaded decaying.
Oh, is it the
fruits.
fruit?
And
Oh, is she here? I would love to see that. I love her work.
it's not showing right now, but I think you should look at images of.
I know her work. Yeah, I'm bad at names, but I definitely know. Yeah, she does the big, like the beautiful lemon and
Yeah.
I love her beaded work. And it's interesting to me because now beading, that is not, I can see how I've gotten to where I am, and that's a whole separate part of my practice right now. But I think the rhinestones and adding that to the ceramics, and then now I'm having these objects that are just beaded, and it's interesting how it's evolving. So, but I love her work.
Jenny, I asked you this question yesterday when we were just chatting, but I think it might be interesting for everyone. We were just kind of talking through your process and how you move from kind of one medium to the next, and how you make those decisions, and kind of how you approach making work for a show.
Yeah. So like how is that the question? How do I approach making work?
Yeah, kind of. Do you just kind of make whatever you feel like making each day, or kind of do you plan it out? Kind of, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So it's been, we were talking about how so I used to just do painting only, and I'd have a show and would be like, okay, I'm gonna make this many paintings, and I'd plan out like, this is the room, this is the scale of paintings. And I kind of had a system that was fairly easy. And then I added clay. And so now I show sculptures and paintings, and I figured out that and also I think because I have 2 rooms and they're separate. So I end up spending like 3 months or something making just paintings, no clay. Then I'll go downstairs and make just clay. And because I found that if I was doing both of them at the same time, it was overwhelming for me, and I would be going like up and down the stairs and not know what thing to work on. And now that I've started this, I've kind of opened up my practice to it being working with any kind of object. I'm kind of having these areas where like I have the clay studio is pretty much just clay, but now my painting studio is like beading and painting, and there's a loom, and there's like so much to do. And so I'm finding that I'm having to schedule, like literally block out, like this week is I'm working on this, and I can't look at this other room, because if I even just walk through that room to get something, I get distracted and I'm like, oh, I should add beads to this, and then I'll get stuck there for like 6 hours, and then I'll be like, wait, I was, so I'm finding that I'm having, as I start diversifying what I'm working in, I'm really having to like corral my brain.
Yeah, where does that bear live right now that you need to bead?
Well, actually,
Pretty big.
He is really big. So actually in that wing, so downstairs is play, then there's a kitchen, then upstairs is painting, and there's actually another little room off of that that used to be storage, but now it is like where the bear lives. And it has a really long wall, like a 15-foot wall. So like big paintings go there, and then all the beading and all the bear and the rug is downstairs with the paintings. But yeah, the bear is kind of in his own room. Yeah.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? Okay.
I have
If not-
one.
Oh, great.
It's Jenny.
Hi,
Hi,
Jenny.
Jenny. Great talk. I wonder, after your time in New York, do you have any themes developing from having been here? Like, do you think that as you reflect on your time, like you had catastrophe when you visited this place and you had this and that from this place. Is there something particular from New York that you think will influence you moving forward?
I mean, that's an interesting question. I think, you know, the other places, it took me a while to realize that that was happening. You know, it wasn't intentional. It was just like a random shift that I would notice over a period of time. I would say the first thing that I would take away from being here is, well, part of it might be that I've been seeing so much art and it's so fantastic. Like, I feel like every couple days I see something where I'm like, this is the best thing I've ever seen. You know, like, this is just overwhelmingly great. And it kind of opens up what's possible. Like, anything is possible. I could make anything. I could, you know, like, there's just this, it's almost like a giving back, like a type of confidence that yeah, that anything can be done. And so I would say, like, there's something about that I'm feeling like I should make things bigger and more complicated and more interesting by like seeing, like, I went and saw Sarah Z's show at the Guggenheim and I was like, oh, this is just, it was so like, I won't stop thinking about it, you know. So there's a lot of art that I've seen like that, and I think that kind of is populating my imagination. At least at this point, it just feels like expansive. I'm sure though, one thing that I've been noticing that I feel like will translate though, is there's a specific color of green that is here, that's in all the industrial stuff. And I don't know what that is, but I'm noticing there's specific colors, like both in green and orange. And I've been taking photos of things like that. And also I think the Natural History Museum, I went and I should have gone there like every day that I was here. And I ended up taking tons of photos of everything because I'm often looking at resource images and I was like, oh my gosh, but these are like, you know, the images become really mediated, and because they're often digital, and which is an interesting concept in itself, but then thinking about pulling imagery from like dioramas, and you know, so I got really interested in like I feel like I need to go back, like every single diorama of the animals and the who painted the background, and like how I could make these just with my phone, take these photos of, like, it looks like a painting to me, you know, like once it's removed in digital. And I feel like there's probably something that's going to happen with that. Also, I was really inspired by like the evolution with dinosaurs, which I mean, I knew that somewhere in my brain from being little, you know, and you know, going to school, but like actually seeing the transition of what's happened was so exciting to me. So I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I feel like those things, you know, I witnessed so much. And also, you know, I saw a glass exhibition, and I've been thinking about adding glass to my work for a long time. And so I sought out blown glass exhibitions and neon, and was like, okay, maybe this is also an area that I need to somehow add into my sculptures. So hopefully that answers that.
Yeah, you'll have to let us know when you start to see what it is from New York that's coming through. You'll have to update us.
Yeah.
And I see a raised hand from Millie. Millie, please go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, hi. Hi, Jen. I'm not sure if it's a question, but I know that when I first heard about the dinner party, I was thinking about the dinner party at the Brooklyn Museum, you know, when it was with the feminist theme, and that.
Yeah, I just saw that today.
You did. Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so in the 1960s and 70s, but you've been able to kind of, in your dinner party, you're kind of, the issue now is not the same as it was when Judy Chicago was doing it. It's different. It's still around women, but it's not as essential as it was then, just in terms of equity. And I think about how you've just kind of opened up this, really, it's like a Pandora's box. Your dinner party is about nature and the environment and politics and all those things that are really like in the forefront, and the responsibility we have in terms of the climate, and you talked about Greta. It's just, it's 60 years later, and it's really just a different focus, but it's another woman bringing it forward. So I
Yeah.
just wanted to say that that's such an amazing thing. And when you talked about your CV, you know, you started off with environmental science. All of this makes so much sense. It's just the terrain you're always in. I wonder if you knew the work of Sandy Skokland.
I don't know if I do.
Yeah, Sandy Skokland, she's a photographer that you might be very interested in, and she's about 75 now, and she works in the environment and nature, animals, and sculpture. Skokland, Skogland, Skokland. And then there's, of course, Laura Latinsky, who's a photographer who has just done a series of very minimalist, the opposite of yours, Jenny, but I think you would really, for detail, appreciate it. The dinner party, the after effects of a dinner party.
Yeah.
In
Oh,
a
I like
nice
that.
way. So those two. And I'm so glad that I came tonight, because I knew that your pieces were monumental just by that gator you had there. I can't tell if it's an alligator or a crocodile. Which is it?
You know, everybody asks me that. I mean, I think it's probably a combination, because I pulled like photos from all over the place.
Yeah. I don't know the
Kind of
difference.
made up. So, I mean, he doesn't, like, I went and looked at the alligator the other day at the Natural History Museum, and I was like, oh, they have they kind of have webbed feet, you know, and mine doesn't have webbed feet. So, I mean, in some ways it's an alligator, it's a crocodile, it's also kind of made up.
Yeah,
So,
I know. And I just really, really, really love your work. I'm so glad I came tonight.
oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it was really interesting seeing Judy. I really wanted to see Judy Chicago's work, and I went there today, and I hadn't realized that there was sculptural plates.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, and what I had learned, I mean, I learned about that piece a long time ago in school, and it was like, you know, a photo this big in a book, or like, you know, 1 second in the slideshow. And it was really interesting to get to experience it in person. And yeah, the sculptural plates is what stood out to me the most. I just had no idea that was even part of it. So.
And then like you, in her time in the 1970s, she's layering fabric. You're layering layers because you're in a digital medium, you know, but it's very similar. It was a maximalist look at,
Yeah.
at the time. It was revolutionary, and that's why it's a permanent exhibition there. And I don't think it'll be there for a long time.
Yeah.
Well, great. Last chance for questions, folks. Anyone have anything else they'd like to ask or say?
I have a question.
Vicky, go for it.
Hi, Jenny. Thanks so much for that talk, and thanks so much for showing like so much work. It was really amazing to like see how you kind of like jump throughout all of these different materials. And it seems like you do it like so fluidly, so confidently, so like, yeah, just like this really like eloquent way. And I'm just wondering, like, I mean, one, I want to ask you if that's true. Like, is there hesitation when you approach a new material? Because I'm like, man, she's just like going for it every step of the way. And that's like really beautiful to see. But yeah, but I also wonder kind of like how you kind of get to the certain materials. Like if it's something that's just like, oh, I saw this thing at a show and it was really amazing and I want to do that too. Or if there's more of like, you know, I can't figure out what's right here. Oh, I'm going to try beading and that didn't work. I'm going to try ceramics. Yeah, I don't know. Can you talk a little bit more about that kind of?
Well, first, thanks for saying it looks confident. That's wonderful to hear. I think I mean, there's moments of feeling confident. I spend a lot of time, I guess I feel like inundated with imagery all the time and ideas. And so I just tell myself, I have my whole life and I write them down. So I'm constantly writing down the ideas and I have like sketchbooks. So there's that, and that kind of keeps me going. And I'll have an idea for a painting or an object, and I'll kind of sketch out like a thumbnail, and I'll be like, well, I think that should be translucent, but I don't know how to do that. And so I'll start thinking about like, well, so like right now glass is one of them, but then I also have been looking at like casting plastic. And so I'll start getting really the idea for it. And then I start researching how I can do it. And sometimes, and then I'll often start researching artists to do it and then go see what like today I also went to a glass blowing place in Brooklyn, just because I needed to like familiarize myself with the language, because I am looking online and I'm like, I don't know, is that hand blown? Is that blown? Is that fused? Like, that's not my language, you know? And so I'll start doing research in other areas. And I also think that like the beading, I felt like I wanted something, you know, I think it kind of went with the beading specifically, it went like glitter on the paintings. I wanted it to be this like oversaturated, gross, beautiful thing. And somehow glitter felt like the thing for that. I did a ton of tests and I had a whole series of that. And then I feel like the glitter moved into rhinestones on the ceramics. Like they're just, with the ceramics, there's like not an, I just could keep going forever. Like I just need to have the object taken away or I'll keep working on it. So, you know, I glaze from like usually cone 6 down to like 20. And then usually even then it doesn't feel done, and I'll like paint it with enamel, and then I add rhinestones because I feel like it just needed to be more. And so I can kind of see that the steps, and also like the application, like, so I'm sitting with rhinestones when I do it on the ceramics, I'm like sitting there for hours with a toothpick gluing them on. And there's something, I set up these problems for myself where I have an idea and then I'm like, how is it that I've gotten to this place where all I do is like glue up one rhinestone at a time? But I think it becomes like meditative. So there might be, and it happens like with painting, it happens with tape, where I end up taping all these little things off, and they all have to be like, it's some kind of fussy part of myself, even though overall I'm messy. So I think there's a way that I, in process, create these problems for myself that are sometimes like rhythmic or repetitive. So I would say like, that's kind of continuing with like the rhinestones and the rhinestones into the beads, where now it's like, I want this glowy, complicated surface where you look at it and it could be a bunch of, like from far away, it's maybe green, but when you look at it, it's incredibly complicated green. And the only way I could think of that was with beads. And then, I mean, another thing is, right now I'm ending up working a lot with my community. Like I've been putting these calls out for materials. And so like beaders have been donating thousands of beads to me, and like yarn groups have been giving me all their remnants. And so it's also like what's showing up in my life. Like if there was like no beads happening, I would have to find another solution, because there's like hundreds of thousands of beads, you know? So I kind of feel like I dream up the vision, and I tell myself anything is, try to be expansive about it and say that anything is possible, and give myself the permission to move in whatever direction, and then see, is it really possible? Will the materials show up? Will I learn how to do this other technique? Hopefully that answers that.
It did.
Kind of ramble.
No, that was great.
Okay.
Okay, only 4 minutes left. So this is truly the last opportunity if anyone wants to ask the final question of the evening. Okay, then Vicky's last question was the last one. Thank you everyone for coming tonight. Thank you to Jenny for a wonderful talk tonight, and also for being such a wonderful resident artist here with us. Friday is Jenny's last day with us. So if you're a student here at the Pottery, stop by, say hi in person. And also, I guess, goodbye. But then we'll be seeing Jenny back here next summer for the group residency show that she'll be a part of. So it's goodbye, but only for a little bit. Anyway, thanks everyone, and have a good night.
Thank you.